So now we are live. And
Hello.
so yes, see, I did the day change because Tuesday's actually kind of hard for me. Because I'm very busy on Monday, and then suddenly Tuesday I'm very busy, and so it feels like I only get work done Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So I wanted to see Wednesday will probably be an easier day for
Mm.
me
That
because
was sort of happening to me too. The same kind of thing where Monday I would come in after the weekend and there would be things that you built up for me over the weekend that I would have to do. And then Tuesday I would have Arcane Mark and this stream. And so between that, it would mean that most of my progress towards something else that wasn't built up over the weekend was on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So
Mhm.
see how it goes.
Yeah, we'll see. I think it'll also
So
help if we have other people on. I couldn't get
yeah.
anyone to come join us today. But yeah,
Yep.
the big issue is it's just Tuesdays were okay, but strangely Wednesdays might be better going forward. So I know it's a bad thing to change your day of streaming, but well, what can you do? I can
Hmm.
only do so much.
Yeah.
I kept the time the same, but we'll
That's
see.
true. If we had known we were going to do it more in advance, we could have warned everybody, but we didn't. So there was no real
Well,
way
I've been
to.
thinking about it for a while, and then I couldn't get my act together yesterday, so I was like, all
Yeah,
right, we'll
nah, it's fine. I
just
mean, we've already got 11 people who found us, even though it's
yeah,
on a different day.
yeah. Look at that. Yeah, it's
Uh,
about average,
there
so
you go.
it'll start popping. But yes, I've been very, very, very busy. I'm actually kind of getting sick of layout because
Oh man, you told me that you liked it so much,
I
you could
love
just keep
layout,
doing
but
it. But
I
Indigo Isles is
know.
just so interminable.
Uh,
It's so long. It's just the most.
it's
It's just
longer than all
amazing
the other
how
books
it's
combined
amazing
times
how
like
much
three.
longer it is than the Abomination Vaults AP, even though they're both a three-part AP. And even though you priced Indigo Isles like I think only $5 more than Abomination Vaults compilation, and Abomination Vaults compilation is 256 pages, and Indigo Isles is what? It's gonna be like 400.
Something. It's big. It's a little too big.
Hey,
It's
$5,
I will never.
$60 instead of
I'm
55,
never
and
doing
get
it again.
50% more.
Never again. This is just every day. It's endless. I mean, it's also
Yeah.
we're a small number of people here. I
Yep.
mean, so
So having you entirely on that and having enough that spills over back onto
uh,
me that's also from Indigo Isles, it
it's
definitely
endless.
definitely has a big effect. But it's also just an awesome product that
Oh,
people are loving when they see it.
it's the greatest adventure path ever made. There we go. I'm firmly believing that after reading every single adventure path I can get my hands on, and
What about Age of Worms, Stephen?
well,
I
it's
know that's your favorite before this.
this is modern. That's the thing. Age of
Oh
Worms
yeah,
was
that's
very
fair.
good,
That's fair.
but the big secret, because I just read someone actually posted the top, like they ranked all the Pathfinder adventure paths.
Uh-huh.
And I was actually kind of surprised at the rankings. I couldn't believe it. I mean, it's just some random. It was actually an article, but they ranked. What do you think came as number one? Which I couldn't believe they
From
ranked
their
as.
rankings,
Yeah, it was an
it
article.
depends on which person does it. I've seen
I don't know
someone
who
on
did
Reddit
it.
who did it,
This
and
was an
like,
article. It was an actual article on
okay,
on one of those geek websites,
fair enough, fair enough.
and
And
they
did
went
this count the
into
Pathfinder first edition ones or just the
second,
second
only
edition?
second,
Okay,
only second, and they had
so I
all
mean,
the new ones, including was it Bloodlords, whatever that one's
yeah,
called, Zombie.
Bloodlords is the
Yeah,
newest
yeah,
one. So I
it had
mean,
all of
Strength of
them.
Thousands often does well. I would think they would put it near the top.
I think that was number two.
Okay, yeah, that usually goes near the top. And then number one usually goes to would probably go to Abomination Vaults just
That
because
was
it
in the
got a
middle.
hardcover,
No, that was
or
like
to
six. That was like
oh,
six.
interesting.
Yeah.
And so like it might, even though I think this is not the best adventure paths of them, Age of Ashes sometimes gets a nod for being first, but
No,
it's
that was
not
at the
actually that
bottom.
good of an adventure
No,
path.
it's not. That was at the bottom. That's not a good adventure path.
Okay. So I don't know how the person does their rankings. So I'm trying to guess based on multiple possible ways of doing it.
It
Strength of
was
Thousands is almost always ranked high.
yeah, well, I agreed with
But
all the rankings except for a few. They had
let me
eight
think.
Ages of Edgewatch was four. I
Okay.
think I'm doing it off
Well, there
memory.
aren't really even that many.
There was 11.
overall,
I think there was
but let me
11.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's 11. Was Fist of the Ruby Phoenix first?
That was, I believe, up there. I think that was second or third. Maybe third, I
Because
think.
if Strength of Thousands was second and Fist of the Ruby Phoenix was third, that one's one that was very well received.
Yeah, that one's good. Also, that has the advantage of them kind of expanding. The only problem with that one is that you don't really fight kaiju. like you fight kaiju, spoiler, but you don't. And I'm like, come on, man. I hate when they do that.
Kaiju are too high level for you to
I know, but it goes, it's that's a bet. You don't want to sucker people into thinking you're going to do something like that, because that's something everyone wants to do.
It is one of the only ones that's like a high level adventure path, and it did it very well, which is why I figured it was pretty highly ranked.
They had Bloodlords was pretty low.
Yeah, I imagine when you've got like you're being so evil, there's a lot of people who don't want to do that.
Yeah, that one was low.
What else is even left? There's Outlaws of Alkenstar.
That was low, actually. I had that one pretty low. I was kind of stunned too.
Like Extinction Curse couldn't have been first.
That was number 1. Which
no way.
Yeah, they ranked it.
I as the design lead on a lot of the books of Extinction Curse after Stephen Rodney McFarlane, who did the first couple books, like left the company, and I like it, but it is. I don't think that was better than some of the other ones.
No, it's not. It's not,
because it has the whole circus, but then not circus thing going on.
As someone who's running it, I can tell you it's definitely not. I mean,
it was early in the cycle, so it had some issues with pacing and other things like that. It's a good adventure path.
It's good. It actually
it's not better than Strength of Thousands.
It's not better than Strength of Thousands. It's not better than Agents of Edgewatch at all. Agents of Edgewatch is like, I think that's one of my top 3 favorite ever. It's
So that means that your top 3 are Indigo Owls, Age of Worms, and Agents of Edgewatch. So I know what your top 3 are.
Well, I'll tell you why. Because Agents of Edgewatch, and I actually go over this in my podcast, it was written by someone who was a child of the 70s and 80s, because it takes from movies from the 70s and 80s, like, and there's mild spoilers here, but like, oh, there's a bomb that you have to, in a public place during a sporting event that you have to find and defuse and get rid of. That is the plot of Black Monday, which is a 70s action movie, which actually was filmed during the Super Bowl, by the way. Back when the Super Bowl was something that no one watched. They actually filmed the movie during the Super Bowl. And so there's, Assault on Precinct 13 and like Taking Pelham 1, 2, 3. It's like all these, and even Ocean's 11, which was originally from the 60s, not even the remakes. So all this was taken from movies I grew up with. And they literally took the movies and they say it right there. It's like, we took the movie and made an adventure path out of it.
Patrick is not as old as being a child of the 70s and 80s, but he likes the films from that age of
but
films.
For someone like me, it's like this is a dream come true. Like, we get to play actual movies, and it's good. It's really good. They mix up the monsters. It's just excellent. It's a lot of fun. You never know, I'm playing with a group that's been playing for 40 years. They constantly are like metagaming, because you can't help it, saying, okay, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. It's not what happens. And they keep getting, even though it's based, that's the crazy part. It's like, okay, it's based on a movie that they know what's going to happen. It's based on,
it puts its own twist on it.
They constantly are like, huh. And they're always surprised. And that is a testament to how good it is. And we were playing, 2 nights ago, and it was just so much fun. They're having so much fun, and it's just so enjoyable. It's really an excellent adventure path. But the one thing I noticed in these reviews I kept reading is disconnection. That's the thing. It's like all these adventure paths, and it's just the nature of adventure paths.
Extinction Curse has disconnection because it has the circus, and then it's disconnected from the A plot.
No, I'm talking about the disconnection between the books. The books are very disconnected.
The smoothness between how the books are connected to each other.
Yeah. And I see that a
Well,
lot.
Jewel of the Indigo Isles is number one on that
Well, I'll
because
tell you,
it's the
that is a
only one that was
nightmare.
built.
Now we see no one. Now we know why no one does it.
It was the only one
It's
that was built in
impossible.
tandem with the
Oh
ability
my
to go
God.
back and forth and adjust
So
all of them
hard.
before it was published ever once. Whereas the other adventure paths,
So
by the time that first volume comes out, it's too late. If you find out in book 3 that you need to change something in book 1, you can't.
It's so hard.
It's very, very hard, but it's very rewarding, and I'm very proud of. Like, I saw what it was like coming in, which was already pretty good because it came from super top Paizo authors who knew their stuff. But I also saw how much you and I and the proofreaders and everyone like added and adjusted to it to make it what it is now.
We even added something. So one thing, I will get to your super chat in a second. Water left.
Water's left.
Water's left.
Like the river left that makes you forget everything in Hades.
Oh God, I wish I could do that. Wait, what was I saying? Oh, something I like to do, and we do this quite a bit, is that you have to do all these things in adventure paths to make them truly excellent. And one of the small ones is if characters die, you need a place where you can find within the story new characters. You also need a place where you can also buy and sell things on a constant basis. Even though we're using a monster part system, you still want to have a place where you can buy and sell, especially if you're in the middle of nowhere. But
maybe not in 5e because their economy is a little weird.
I'm talking about in Pathfinder. In Pathfinder, and it's hard to do it naturally. But I will say, without spoilers, we managed to figure out how to do it. And even last night, remember, in the first adventure,
that's because David and Ross, our converter for 5e, found another extra place where you can put in a shop. And it was a very good idea.
It was excellent. It was such a. Here's the joke: that was actually my idea, and I forgot about it.
Oh wow!
It was like
great minds think alike, Steven.
Well, no, it was in my notes. And Patrick forgot, and I forgot.
He just didn't do it.
He just didn't do it.
It makes sense that there was literally a merchant there. It just didn't say that.
Yeah, so basically,
the kind of things that they would buy weren't listed.
Yeah, so what happened is you're in the middle of literally like nowhere, so you can't even go back to town because it would take you days. But you find a merchant in the middle of nowhere who just happens to have stuff. It's kind of like the Resident Evil. I always like the merchants that open up their coat. That's exactly what it's like. Oh, here you go. I got stuff for you. And you can just buy and sell. And it's low level too. So it's realistic that they have a couple of things for sale. Not a ton. It's not like a huge store, but enough for you to at least restock. And it makes sense because the person is actually a merchant. Like they literally are a merchant. I think actually when I did that, I was like, mwah, that was like the chef's kiss. I was like, perfect. That's exactly what is needed.
It just shows that he was very hooked in when converting it to 5e to what you were thinking of.
Yeah,
so let's get to Water's Left's super chat and the topic at hand about power gaming in D&D and Pathfinder. So Water's Left said, I've been listening to RPG horror story reads, and power gaming is a frequent cause of strife in those. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. So
what's an RPG horror story?
I think it's like it's a Reddit or something that it's either a subreddit or one of the other famous things that you go on, and it has like absolutely spine-chillingly bad situations that happen to people at their tables. And if you like reading a train wreck, then you might like reading RPG horror stories. I've heard about it, but I haven't really read it, which is why I don't remember for sure if it's a subreddit.
I'd be a bad person because you guys know you know how I run my tables is with an iron fist.
So I guess if anyone's been watching this show long enough, when you see a controversial topic, you know what I'm gonna say.
What?
You don't, Steven? Which is first, we have to define what we mean by power gaming because of the fact that power gaming, optimizing, and munchkins are three different terms that are tossed around a lot.
Yes.
And they are sometimes equated to each other. And they are also, everybody has a different idea of what it means to be a power gamer. So for some people, power gaming, the word power comes from the idea of the power fantasy, where you're playing One Punch Man and literally, the GM sets up for hours this encounter, and on your turn, you kill everything on your first turn. Like, I mean, that's basically, if you watch the show One Punch Man, that's what the show is, and that's the humor of the show. Is that the show spends 20 minutes on the backstory of the villain, then he comes in and he kills everything in one punch immediately, and that's why it's a comedy show. But that's how some people feel power gaming is equivalent to power fantasy. Some people think of power gaming as meaning that you're going to find rules exploits or like glitches, or like be a rules lawyer by trying to promote murky rules interpretations to get your advantage. Some people think of it as more of like a sport with good form, where you have to like follow the spirit of the rules, but still find combinations that are game breaking. Some people think of it as just sort of optimizing, as in terms of, well, don't make your character who's a fighter with 10 strength and dexterity and misses with all of your attacks, but just like do a bare minimum into it. So you have to know sort of what you're talking about here. I think to most people, when they use the word power gaming, they have a somewhat negative connotation towards overpowered gaming, that they're making it maybe not all the way to One Punch Man, I kill everything in one hit, but that how the power gamers are trying to build something that is like beyond the expectations of the game's difficulty level. And I think that is where you come into it when people are asking, is it a bad thing? Is it a problem? What do you think, Steven, for how do you define power gaming?
So this is the reason. I'll tell you why I chose topic, but first up, don't forget, you can like and subscribe, and if you do a super chat, we'll answer it right away. But of course, ask questions and we will get to them. Oh, we got a lot of likes already. Keep them likes coming, and do ask us questions, super chats. As I said, we answer right away. And if you subscribe to the channel, we of course will also answer those right away, and you'll get cool badges and stuff. Power gaming, in my opinion, is that at least for a role-playing game, is that, I'll give an example. Like back in the day, when you had to roll your dice to, before it was point builds, you would miraculously have a character that had 18, 18, 17, 16, 15. It's like every stat was above 15. It's like, really? Yeah. Did you really roll that?
I literally watched as the GM watched the player roll that character.
Oh yeah, it's possible. Don't get me wrong.
By once, I mean only once,
right?
And it was using 4d6, drop the lowest, not like 3d6, of course. We were all just like flabbergasted, because we were all literally watching them throw it out. It's like, this is statistically impossible, and then nobody ever did that well ever again.
It's not impossible. Oh, I got you. I'm always the one to hyperbole. You're the one. It's not impossible. It's just improbable. And we were playing. It was Age of Worms. And we did the point build. And sure enough, my friend Chris had a monk. And monks in 3.5 are very hard to optimize, because you just couldn't get everything. And of course, his stats were like that. And we were playing. And
that's not even power gaming to take the minimum there. In 3.5 and 3.0, like, you kind of had to in point build if you didn't get enough points.
Well, he didn't have point build. We didn't do point build. We did.
Oh, you were rolling.
We did rolling, really, and he had like. And then what happened is okay. So in the beginning, I felt like he was OP because he was really powerful, and he and I had a big argument over this. And I said, look. And then I found out about point builds, and I said, this is what we're gonna do. You have to rebuild. And he's like, I can play my character any way you want. I'm like, okay. Here's the point build. I think I gave him 25 points. I'm like,
yeah, I figured that's a pretty generous amount. That's a little higher than the average of rolling. A little higher.
Guess what his point build was? I figured it out.
I'm sure it was like 40 something if you rolled that high.
54. He had a 54 point build character. And I was like, dude, you're rebuilding? You got 25 points. And it's like, okay.
54.
And I know. It was ridiculous. So that's power gaming. And you know what? It was so much better. And like, I actually also had the other people, but theirs were like in the 30s. His was in the 50s.
54. Like 6/16 is 60 in 3.0. So 54 is like almost as good as rolling all 16.
No, everything was a 15, 16, 16, 17, 18, 18. It was like that. That's basically what we had. I forgot.
54 is like 16, 16, 16, 15, 15, 15.
It was better than
like
that. He had several 18. He had nothing lower than 15.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was probably even higher than 54.
It probably was even. It was probably like 56. It was in the 50s. I remember that.
Yeah, wow.
And then we went back, and I remember
15 is 8 points. And
yeah.
Oh
now
gosh.
The 3.5 has different math slightly. Don't forget.
Yeah, I'm using the 3.5.
And then we did do
8,
I think
10, 13,
Gestalt, because Age of Worms is incredibly hard. So it was like Gestalt or 3 or 25, something like that. But I gave him more points than normal, a little bit more, and because I didn't want to totally gimp them. But one thing we discovered is like not only was it way more fun, but ever since then, they have totally embraced it to the point that I told you that our agents of Edgewatch, not only did they not take the free level 1 archetype feat, which, archetype, whatever, they did, some of them did, but not everyone. 2 out of the 4 of them took flaws for their characters. Unheard of. They purposely gimped their characters, and they're doing fine. It's basically they're playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition on hard mode. And you know what? Don't get me wrong, it's hard and they get really close to death, but I know for a fact they're enjoying it because I didn't even ask them to do it. They did it. They do it themselves. And I always think of this time when I was playing, I forgot what it was. It was a video game and I was really enjoying it. And I put in the God mode, like code to have like unlimited everything. And the game was so boring, I never played it again. And it learned a lot there. I was like, you know what? You kind of need, without the difficulty, without the challenge, without the conflict, there's no fun. And that's my issue with God mode. So in my opinion, a God mode is going in with a 25 or 40 point build, that's God mode, or sorry, overpower, power gaming. Just going in,
Yeah, that's the question. God mode's another really good term for that's a little different. And I think most people consider God mode based on, or most people in my generation may consider it based on like literal video games that had a cheat that you could type in for God mode that made you invincible.
Yep.
And that you automatically won. And that, I think a lot of people consider God mode to be like higher tier than power gaming in terms of how powerful it is.
But it taught me a lesson, because it ruined the game for me forever. And ever since then, I don't do that. And if anything, I'm a big proponent of, not gimp your characters, but the flaws. This is what I say. I think you can very easily break your character in these games. So don't go against, like, if your character's main attribute is strength, don't give them a 12 strength, okay? Put the stats where they're supposed to be, okay? Because that will break your character, and that's too far the other way. But if you don't need charisma, dump it or make it an 8. It's like, and you'll be amazed. You'll have fun with that. A lot of these guys, all of them have low intelligence because none of them have intelligence except for, I think, the investigator. But they all have like 8s in there for intelligence. So whenever they make mistakes, it always comes up. It's like, well, my intelligence is only an 8, and it comes up all the time, and it's funny. It's funny, and they don't need it. It's not a stat they need.
So here's the funny thing about the defining thing. What you were just talking about there.
Yeah.
For many people, making sure you have a low stat while you're using a system like the ABC system in Pathfinder 2 or a point buy is power gaming. Whereas for your group, having a low stat is not power gaming. Like, for instance, in my group, we had one player who he was great at role playing a really low mental ability score, like fantastic. He made it so much fun to have his character that was an Inquisitor in Pathfinder 1st Edition who had like 7 intelligence and charisma, because he would just think of the worst possible thing to say and he would say it, and it would be hilarious for his character. Like when there was like they were supposed to be defending someone who might get attacked on a ship. And so when the party went to sleep, he would just prowl around at night just in case something happened. And so he was the first who found the body of the person they were trying to protect. Even though in the adventure, it's supposed to be that like the captain gets in first and finds the body. It's like, no, well, he was literally there. And so everyone else comes in and the captain's like, was he with you guys? They were like, no, we had no idea where he was. And then he casts Create Water, destroying all of the evidence because of the fact one of the other party members had previously said maybe the guy was faking his death. And when the captain was like, why did you do that? He said, I needed to make sure he was dead. And right? That's because he was playing his low intelligence and charisma, and that's like,
oh, I've seen that all the time. That's actually, but that's role playing.
But he was also doing it because he wanted to optimize, and Power Game and Inquisitor needed a lot of other stats, so he got extra points for having 7 intelligence and charisma. He used them to buy up his constitution and dexterity and wisdom.
So now this is I'm gonna say something fascinating. So Pathfinder First Edition was very easy to power game in the sense that you could very easily make these characters that were like nigh impossible gods. And the number one complaint that I see for Pathfinder Second Edition, because Mark did too good of a job, is that it is nigh impossible. It is impossible unless you like really start just changing the rules or have very high point buys. You cannot really power game Pathfinder, which is the number one complaint. A lot of people say it's either too hard or that you can't power game. There's no thing that gets you a +2 to your stats. There's just no ability. There's nothing in the game that does that. There's no ways to, get pluses on your saves until what level is that? Like, where do you get that?
Level 8.
Level 8. Level 8 is where you can finally start getting things plus into your saves, which is a long, long way away. So it's like, damn, man, like it takes so long to get that +1 to your will save. You're almost halfway through your character. And, in the old days, there was all this stuff that you can just power game by getting all this equipment. But since there's no equipment that lets you do this, there's no feats that really let you do it, there's no ways to make your character stronger. You literally can't power a game, and people are angry, which is, I think, where the free archetype came from. Because people like, okay, I gotta somehow make my character a little bit more powerful.
I mean, not really. Like I wrote that free archetype variant before. Like, no, but I think not people like there's a thing and then people are angry and then we write free archetype. That's not how no, I know,
but people just happened to pick up on it and decided to use it. And
I don't think the free archetype actually lets you break the numbers. So you just brought in a lot of really, really interesting. It definitely is powerful free archetype, but
yes,
you brought in a lot of interesting points that brought in different interesting definitions of power gaming that I want to tease out there a little. So at first you were talking about power gaming, definitely in the power fantasy I win aspect of it. And you were also equating it very much to the numbers boosting that is available in Pathfinder First Edition, actually more in 5e than people think, with things like Bless and adding an extra D4 here and there. And Pathfinder Second Edition is very tight on the leash with random number boosts that you can use to just get your modifier so high that any D20 roll is just going to succeed. I would even argue that like just getting the basic number boosting gear in Pathfinder First wasn't even power gaming. I think that just not getting that gear was a trap for new players because it was not stated to be an assumption in the same way that in Pathfinder Second it is, and there's an automatic bonus progression. And it was just like, here, there's hundreds of items. We hope you figure out that there's like 6 of them that raise your bonuses that you absolutely have to get or you're going to fall behind. I think that those items are almost providing a baseline in Pathfinder
but keep
First
in mind,
Edition. But then you could still really power game Pathfinder First Edition by taking a certain combination.
You could power game. Wait, you could power game because like, I'm just making this up, but say like, the base to hit at first level was like, you would always hit, say, I'm totally making this up, like 40% of the time. But then when you were like level 10, you can get that up to 60% of the time. And then when you're like level 15, you can get that up to 80% of the time.
Sure, but the game's expectations and what the actual numbers, you're right, are like more like 70, 95, 95.
Yeah, it got
Because
crazy, right? You were
but
always
the
hitting.
game's expectations were that that first attack was going to hit, except on a natural one.
Right.
That's why you often made attacks at like a minus 15 at those higher levels.
Yeah, but like
And power attack was in there that lowered
Right,
your
right.
accuracy for extra damage. Like it had a math that was kind of out of control, and the system knew that it did, and it put in some weird things that, I mean, not even weird. It put in things that knew that, like, there's no way you would add an attack that's made it a negative 15 if you didn't know that that first one was already overkill and was like basically always going to hit. Because otherwise, of course, the negative 15 wouldn't hit because it's like there's only 20 sides on the die, right? If you needed even a 4 to hit the monster, if you take a negative 15, you need a 19 to hit. It's like there's not much point to it. So I feel like that aspect of the system maybe was intentional and was not part of power gaming, but I do still feel that you're very correct that you could power game Pathfinder first a lot by getting certain sort of broken or out of control options that were in there that would just make you kind of one punch man things. So there are people in chat putting some of their own definitions here. Like Michael McGrew pointed out, is it making a character that's good at everything with no weaknesses, power gaming, or a character extremely competent at a few things? Is that power gaming? And Waters Lath had a really good one. Power gaming is going into the game with the expectation being able to always succeed at any given challenge, using only the player-facing character build options, and not using teamwork with your allies or strategy or thinking about what you're doing.
Yeah, and that's a secret because Pathfinder Second Edition, I've said this a lot, is that if you don't work together, you're gonna fail. Like it's just the way the game has been designed. I mean, you probably know this. It's like,
I mean, it was intentional that you might be able to do it without teamworks if you are just so good at tactics that you could do the tactics even though your team members aren't listening to you. Maybe. But you've got to do some kind of smart play instead of just like sort of the equivalent of mindlessly button mashing in a 2D fighter game, which is likely like the sort of the analogy, and there's nothing wrong with games that are like this. They're fun. I've played 2D fighter games that are button mashing and enjoyed doing it. Is the PF1 is kind of like a 2D fighting game where there's 1,000 characters that you can pick, or like some absurd number, and if you find the right one or read online about which one it is and then go to the little square in the character select and press A to select that character, then as soon as you get into the fight you kind of win. You just press like, oh, this guy has a move that if you do forward B, it's unblockable and it kills them. That's kind of Pathfinder first, whereas Pathfinder second is more of a, okay, well, I've picked my character, but now I need to know that this guy has long reach, so if this is a fighting game, I need to block his attack and then do a high kick or something like that. You need to think about what you're doing.
Yeah, you have to, like our guys, they're always flanking. They're always using, oh my God, Inspired Courage. Oof. Talk about the most broken thing in that game. So broken.
It's so powerful.
It's so good. It is so
really
powerful.
Funny about
it's really
Courage
powerful
because it was actually non-trivial during the cycle of the creation of the game for like me to convince some of the other people who were playing it, even in like closed playtest, and that is like, no, this is a very powerful effect.
It's very powerful
because we get proposals for abilities that were stronger than it, and I was like, no, like really no stronger than this. Trust me, if people play the game for enough time, they will see how strong
that +1
this
comes
effect
so
is.
much.
And so it's like, no, like this should be the top tier of what,
especially if you have flanking, and then you get a +3. Basically, it's almost a free attack if you have finesse.
Even internally, it was hard for people to see the power of a +1 until having done it for enough time.
Oh, I see it. I see the math.
But now, everyone who's an experienced player, more or less, of Pathfinder Second Edition has noticed how powerful a bonus can be.
But let's see. So basically, in my opinion, power gaming is you are either. So my opinion is power gaming is that you are either optimizing your character not for the sake of role playing, but for the sake of being as perfect as possible, or literally breaking the rules and like begging the GM, I need a 30-point build. And then maybe the one, even worse, if one person gets a 30-point build and everyone else has like a 15-point build. And then they're like, that's a whole other topic I'll get into. It's like one person being way too powerful versus a group, because that's a group dynamic. So that's another thing.
So that's a good definition to go into, and it matches well with what Revamp Master said in chat. Let's talk about the definition of power gamer, where you're literally breaking the rules or asking the GM to please let you break the rules.
Right.
Or as Revamp Master said, going into the game for no reason to have a team or role play and causing problems for others. Because everything is scaled to the power gamer. That's Revamp Master's definition of power gamer.
So power gaming is weird.
You can see that it sounds like you're agreeing with that somewhat, Steven. I would say if that is your definition of power gaming, then the episode is over, and yes, it's a bad thing because it was defined as being that it was bad.
Well, no, but the thing is,
it's obviously bad if your definition is that it includes that it is causing problems for others.
But this is the thing, right? Here's the thing: like, if you all decide, like, if you say, and I'll give you an example. We played a game of which adventure path was that? Oh, it was what's the one where they go to Tin Sha? Jade Regent.
Is it the first edition one?
Yeah, first edition Jade Regent. So Jade Regent, I wasn't in this one, but I heard all the stories, is that they only had 2 players for that and a GM. So they decided, okay, we're going to only play 2 characters, but we're going to make them really powerful and only have 2 characters and make them 2 levels above everyone else. And they just steamrolled that damn thing, even though they only had 2 characters. It didn't matter how many like extra. By the end, Seth was adding a huge number of monsters, and it just didn't matter. These guys were just too damn powerful because they power gamed, made their characters on purpose, but everyone agreed to do it. So it wasn't power gaming. It was actually more of a weird experiment to see what would happen if you did that. And no one complained. Like, none of them, they actually finished the adventure path. They had a good time, but it was an interesting experiment to see, like, if you make your characters way stronger than they should be, but only have 2 of them instead of 4, what would happen? And the answer was that they ended up, especially by the end, they were just steamrolling the whole thing. And it didn't matter. It just didn't matter how many.
That's a really great anecdote.
Yeah.
That I like. And you know what? The part that I found most exciting or most interesting about what you said is just 4 little words. But it wasn't power game. That was fantastic, because
they all
that
agreed.
Just shows what your definition of power gaming is. I think a lot of people would say it was power gaming, but the power gaming isn't necessarily a bad thing when it's done in that perspective. Right. Our question for our episode is power gaming a bad thing? And if you define it as, oh, well, this time we did it, it wasn't bad, so therefore it wasn't power gaming, then of course it's a bad thing, because you're taking all the times when it's not bad and saying that there aren't power gaming.
Yeah, that was fine.
Depending on your definition, we'll go with my definition for the moment, which does not include that it has to be a bad thing. I think that power gaming could be a bad thing, especially if it's one player who is doing it way more than the rest of the group's expectations. But I want to call this out here because of the fact that, like, I like to optimize things too, but only when I am in harmony with my group. It's equally or possibly even more bad if you, even worse, sorry, like, I know English, I really do. If you have a group of 6 players and have 1 or 2 that are power gaming, is not as bad as if you have a group of 6 players and 2 of them are like super building characters that they're like hipster anti-optimizing. I don't mean like you refuse to take this feat that one of the players thought was the best feat. I mean like, oh, well, it's so passe to have intelligence on my wizard. I shall have 10, and I will continue to use attack spells. So, and everyone saved against my spells. That shows that I'm role playing more than you, because I had 10 intelligence and my spells always fail or something, right?
Yeah, that's breaking your own. That's breaking the game. That's the other end.
Those are equally disruptive.
That's bad.
And it sounds like a parody, and that nobody does that, but people actually.
We did that. We did that with our Kingmaker. I've said it many times. Is that 2 of the 4 players tried the role play and broke their characters, and by the end, by level 4, it was so miserable that they suicided their characters, And I've seen both ends of the spectrum. I've seen someone with a 54-point build, and I've seen someone who gives their wizard 12 intelligence, and you know what? In the end of the day, you got to be in that sweet spot. You just like, it's a game, and you can gimp your characters, especially in first edition Pathfinder, especially in 3.5. And I don't know about fifth edition, because fifth edition's a weird. Fifth edition, it's like you feel like a superhero in fifth edition, but I think that's kind of the point. So power gaming at 5e is a whole other subject. I think in some ways it's like, I think the point of 5e is the power game, especially after level 5, and it's more like who is power gaming more than like, and who is having, who the fights are almost secondary to the role playing, which is, I think what they're trying to go at. But the I'm reading some of these comments. Someone actually said, if you want a power game, play the Owlcat games. I completely agree. Like the Owlcat games,
they build in power gaming to a massive degree, and they allow certain,
you can power game to death in that.
Certain broken combinations that our group, like, we get together and vetted options for PF1. We were very optimization heavy. Our characters are super powerful. The GM boosts everything up. I'm the GM most of the time, so I boost everything up. But even our group has certain combinations that were like, no, that's not intended, or that's a mistake, or we're banning this. Owlcat actually allows a lot of those, and then the difficulty level you can get onto, and a lot of our players play those games, and they're like, this is even harder than we run it by a lot. But so they're just very, very, very optimization heavy. And I would say that's still power gaming, even though the Owlcat opposition is so powerful that you don't necessarily automatically win it. Like, you're just kind of building to face the opposition there.
So I would say power gaming is bad when it's actually, my definition is when one person is doing it to the detriment of the group. If everyone is powerful, then no one is powerful. I love that from the,
is it
for
still
the Invincibles.
Power gaming if they aren't one person doing it to the detriment of the group? That's
well, if two people are doing it, but gaming? Well,
if your whole group is doing it, is it still power
well,
gaming?
It's the old Incredibles. It's like when everyone's a superhero, then no one is. It's the same thing. If everyone has a 50-point build, then no one has a 50-point build, because everyone's powerful, everyone's strong, everyone's going to be destroying everything in that game. So they're all the same level. I think power gaming, by my definition, is that one person is either exploiting the rules if there's a specific exploit, and constantly using it, like trip locking, which don't even get me into trip locking. Like, I banned that in my games, because it's like, if you do that, I basically will kill you. It's like, it is so, it's not even power gaming. It's just, I don't even know what you would call trip locking. It's just annoying as hell. Things like that. There's just ways to make it so that you always hit the I win button, and that, in my opinion, is power gaming. It's like trying to figure out how to always win every situation, no matter what. And it doesn't matter the challenge that's put against you. It's like,
that's similar to what Waters Lit defined it as. That's what you just said is very similar to their definition, which was going into the game with the expectation of being able to always succeed at any challenge that you possibly face, using only your build options to build a character that can do that, regardless of tactics or teamwork.
Yeah. I mean, here's an example of I don't know if you call it power gaming, but like one of our monks in our game is Mountain Stance, and all of his stuff is based on ground. And they went into, it was a pretty hard fight, into an area where they were floating. And he was like, wait, I can't touch the ground. I'm like, nope. And they kept trying to. I'm like, you can't. It's like, you're stuck. It's like, it was like the fizzy lifting drinks room. And he's like, oh, crap. And I was like, none of his abilities worked because he couldn't touch the ground. And oh, boy, was there complaining. So that's the other flip side of power gaming, is that when people don't get to play with their toys, they get really disruptive at the table. It's like when they don't get to be who they want to be, I'm like, well, it's a challenge. That's part of the game. Like,
that's why that's why I hooked it into the power fantasy.
Right.
Because some people are playing for different things. Right. Let's go back to that. We talked about definition a lot, but let's go back to root causes and like the psychology behind it, right? Mm-hmm. Some people, like when I am coming to a game, I want to play a game so that I have to think about what I'm doing and overcome a challenge by like kind of, using my strategy to win it. Like I'm the kind of gamer who, and this is literally true, beat Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon on that really high difficulty level without losing any party members. It was obnoxiously hard, and it absolutely did require reloading a few times, which is why they put the little save points into it. But it is, I like to go for like the really weird thing where it's like, yeah, I was outmatched and I couldn't even lose one unit, but I found choke points and did other weird strategies so that I could manage to survive that. But there are some people who that's not what they're coming to your game for. Like legitimately, they've had a long, hard week. They're burned out. Their brain is just about melted down by work burnout. And now they just want to be like Thurgar the barbarian, and they just want to smash, and they want to see Thurgar just annihilate everything with her axe, right? Just like no matter what she does, Thurgar just destroys everything and without thinking about it. And for them, like there's nothing wrong with having that desire for a power fantasy, and there's nothing wrong with wanting a game where you have to think about the game and you win the game by strategy rather than just like button mashing A. Like they're both very relatable, very reasonable desires, but unfortunately, they can be mutually exclusive because like a group that needs to use tactics is almost definitionally not a group that can just mindlessly win, and wanting to mindlessly win is not bad. And wanting to have to use tactics is also not bad. So nobody is bad here. To me, power gaming is a term that I don't use as often as optimizing because of the fact that I think optimizing is easier to define, where you're trying to make something that is particularly strong. Power gaming is a term that gets thrown around when two subsets of people in your group have different expectations about what they want out of the game. And power gamer is what the group that wants the more mindless victory they get called that. And also people who are just interested in toying around and building and optimizing sometimes get called that. Even if they actually wouldn't mind a tactical game, they just kind of want a strong character because just to see what, they built it just to see what could happen. So I think it's a term that gets thrown out outside of like group expectations not matching.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's like we keep talking about it, all these different things, but in the end, and now we've been talking about it a lot, I'm starting to see what I think a definition of power gaming is that you are more powerful than the other PCs, that you want to win using a win now button. I use that term a lot. It's like, oh, I just do this and I win the encounter no matter what. Doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a swarm or whether it's a dragon or whether it's an invisible creature, I can still kill it. And more importantly, that you're ruining other people's fun, including the GM, which people forget all the time, because there is nothing worse, at least in my opinion, since I'm a forever GM, is that you spend all this time and effort to make an interesting encounter and make a challenge, and then you have characters who come in and they're just like, oh, I just blow up the room and everyone dies and that's it. And you're like, wow, I just spent all that time and you guys just destroyed it. Now,
so here's my counterpoint on that, though.
Let me finish, though. Okay. That's okay once in a while, or even most
you said
of the
same
while.
Thing I was going to say.
It's fine. I don't mind it. But after your 50th time in a row, it's like, okay, enough, enough. Like you can't. You want. I get it. You want to win everything, And then here comes the worst part: is then if I somehow find a way to challenge them, they complain, and I'm like, you have the gall to complain after you've gone in and nuked everything I've ever put against you, and now you actually have a speed bump and you're angry. Well, too bad. It's like, damn, man. It's like, well, there's challenge. And, that's also the difference between, I think, really good players and, not good players. Like, we had something that happened recently where I won't get into it, but they were surprised. So everyone was sleeping. They were attacked. They didn't have their armor on. And they were and they're level 13 no less. And they're like, uh-oh, like they're dead.
That's
like,
really bad.
Except for one of them was a monk and one was a...
I was about to say, do you have a monk?
One was a monk, so he didn't care, and one is a spellcaster, so he didn't care. But the other two did care. And then, of course, they were hiding. The bad guys found the hiding spot, and it looked really bad, except for the investigator who said, oh, you found it? Sphere of invisibility. And they disappeared. Nice. And I was like, there you go. Like, I didn't script that. And I had it that they look there. Oh, they don't see anything, and they moved on. Perfect. And I was like, that's it. That's how you game. Like, like I didn't know they were going to do that. And that was genius.
Yeah.
And that's what makes the game fun and memorable.
Having that happen every once in a while is actually really good. Yes. But the problem I feel with if you have someone who's just auto winning on their turn every time is that it not only does it make it for everyone else to sigh, but also it actually steals the specialness of that.
Yes.
Like, for example, I had a homebrew game where the party actually had tough fights a lot because I was homebrewing all of the monsters. They usually had big trouble, even on any boss fight.
In Little China? Knew
that this campaign ending fight where they had been like hired by the spy master of the Jade Emperor, but then they eventually decided to turn on the Jade Emperor and like assassinate him. And they knew that going into his palace that it was going to be rough because he had these generals and these other mages, and his throne could call in like a horde of dragons after like the first round, and it was going to be a multi-stage boss fight. So what happened was the Wujen rolled a maximized disintegrate, and I rolled a natural 1 on my save against it. A 2 would have made the save. A 1 failed. And the Jade Emperor died on the first turn before he could call in the army of dragons, before his the PCs had successfully sneaked in. They had an inside job somewhat. So they got to the Wujen went first and just killed him. And people were freaking out. They loved it. Even though it was like the very end of the campaign and it had just kind of just been won instantaneously. They gave high fives to him. But if that happened every fight, everyone would have just been upset that it also happened at the end. But since it was so different than their expectations and it almost never happened, people loved it. And so that's the sad thing about it, is that actually having those happen occasionally is great for the dramatic tension and makes you feel excited and happy for that person, but doing it every time kind of steals the specialness, in my opinion.
So the other thing that is part of power gaming is kill stealing. And in our games,
is that actually part of power gaming, or is that something else?
No, I think it can be, because they feel like they want to win everything. And I've like in ours they actually do the Legolas thing where they keep track and they like kind of have fun with it to see who like gets more kills, but it's a joke. Like, they're not dead serious, but I've seen people who get visibly angry when they'll say do 100 points of damage to them. They're like, they're still alive. And then you have the poor other character who, has the dagger. 10 points of damage. Right.
Oh,
well, I do that. And, as a GM, I will purposely, and I will admit this, is that sometimes if like, okay, maybe they had 100 hit points. Well, you did 100 points of damage. Well, now they have 101 hit points. And then the next person goes.
I'm telling
well, and then, you know what? And then, so that person gets the kill. And I'm like, because at least, then you balance it. It's like, because they're like, oh, I got him, yay. And then the other person feels good, who maybe has the not as power gamed character, and you spread around the wealth. And it's very easy to do as a GM, especially when you're like, okay, everyone's going to go. This character, the monster's dying this round anyhow. Someone will kill him. It's like someone's going to hit him and kill him. And that, and that way you're at least not giving the power gamer everything. They're not winning every single thing.
So here's my theory on this. That if we want to define power gaming as being that you build a character who can just win any challenge on their own without teamwork or strategy, then I think that kill stealing is actually an anti-power gaming thing, because of the fact that it is rampantly true that one of the most foolish and ill-advised things you can possibly do in the game is, if Steven's character did 100 damage to the monster, I go next, and then the monster goes after that, and I say, oh, well, I suppose I won't do the last 5 damage to it, and I will let it get a full turn of destroying us so that Steven can get the final blow. It's like, there's literally no reason not to, quote, kill steal. The term kill stealing is like a pejorative, but it's really just, I call it focus fire.
Yeah,
and like
you're right. Right?
It is.
We
so
joke about
foolish
it, though.
and bad decision not to kill the monster. That I would say that actually that it's more of power gaming to it's what the non-power gamers do when they just want a tactical play, is team up against a monster.
No, you're right.
I'll call it teaming up and focus firing and not kill stealing.
But my point is, sometimes you do hear the ones like, oh, I never get to kill the monster. I never get to kill the monster, so I try to at least make it so they do once in a while.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
What you're saying is not that power gamers are the ones who team up and try to quote kill steal. You're saying that in a power gaming group, you'll have issues of envy where the people who aren't power gaming kind of want to get some kills and they never do. That's I totally agree with you on that.
That's what I'm talking about. It's that, right.
I won't argue with that.
And I will say, not even in power gaming, I will say, especially if you have, like we have in our Agents of Edgewatch, there's 3 attackers. There's 2 frontliners, 1 midliner, and then the healer. And, when the healer gets the kills, he's always like, haha, and he feels good because he doesn't really get to do a lot of damage.
It feels really special.
Yeah.
Like in Pathfinder First Edition, you guys probably may remember, cantrips did not scale.
No, God,
Acid Splash did 1d3.
Yeah.
I had a very powerful wizard, but she was very, very paranoid, and she never cast any of her spells except her cantrips, pretty much, unless things were going bad or she thought the fight would be dangerous, which was almost never. But everyone's going to remember the time that there was this weird Oni, and we actually didn't know he was an Oni because he was in human form, so this was better than we expected. And we fought him. And the paladin used Aura of Justice, which makes you get this absolutely absurd in Pathfinder First Edition buff. It is completely out of control, and he had an item that made it better. So anyway, on my turn, I one-shotted the boss with a 1d3 Acid Splash, and it had like 100 hit points. And so everyone remembered it because I was like, okay, well, whatever. I'll just throw an Acid Splash. I'm sure you guys have this. But what happened was the paladin allowed me to add his level +3 from an item, which was like 14. And then it turned out to be a fiend, so it got doubled to 28. And then there were another buff that was up that added even additionally more. And then I got a critical hit against the enemy. And it was like weak to acid or something. I don't know. But it wound up just dying. And everyone's jaw dropped because like it was supposed to be a D3. What was even happening?
I'm like, it's fascinating reading the comments because people are all over the place on the comments, but because it's like I did see people are like, oh, if your GM changes things, are they cheating? And no, you're not, because you're the GM. But I did read
my definition, which I think we've said before, which is can a GM cheat? My answer is yes, but only if they break the social contract that they have with the group.
Yes.
So if you have a social contract with the group that says, I will never adjust the hit points of the monsters, and then you do it anyway, that is cheating.
Yes.
But that the GM can't cheat except for if they break their social contract and expectations of what the group expects them to do. And if you tell the group at the beginning, it's like, look, we're gonna follow it normally, but sometimes the math does weird things, and I'm gonna. This is not what I do, by the way, but just if you have this expectation of like, I'm gonna nudge things a little bit to make it a lot more interesting, just occasionally, generally not against you, generally to help you out when the math or the dice are doing something really weird, and you let people know that, then it's fine. But if you tell people, I will never change it, and then you do it anyway, I think it kind of is cheating. But in a way, it sometimes actually leads to better experiences for the players anyway, because they like thinking that you weren't cheating. So I just don't ever change anything myself personally, but I see why people do it, even when it's violating the social contract, because it can help.
No, I see. That's right. But I heard a great joke. God, it's such a good joke. Is that they say the GM is being a god, but that's not true because gods are merely NPCs.
That's great.
I was thinking about that. I'm like, oh my God, you're right. We're above God. We are the gods of gods. But anyhow,
yeah, sometimes the GM is sort of playing the role of like, in the old Clash of the Titans movie where the gods
I think about
the chessboard and they were moving the heroes
all
around
the time. Right? I always think of the Clash of the Titans and like moving the chessboard. I'm like, that's what I'm doing. I'm moving the chessboard.
In some games, the GM is kind of like that.
Yes.
And just because of the way it sets up, like for instance, Linda ran a Skull and Shackles campaign where one of the characters is devout to Besmara, the pirate goddess. And Besmara, the pirate goddess, loves to throw completely dangerous things that are fun and interesting in front of her followers so she can kind of gleefully clap and watch her followers having to deal with this problem. And then she throws like treasure and rewards if they entertain her and do something interesting. That's in world that she does things like that. And that's what the GM is basically doing, right? So we had one player who was the shaman was playing the straight man, and he would just be like, we definitely should not do this. It is absurdly dangerous. There's no reason to. We have plenty of money. And then the swashbuckler of Besmara was like, no, listen, if we are boring, Besmara is going to wreck us. We have to be interesting, and she'll keep favoring us. So we will just foolishly do this daring raid. And I admit that there's no real reason to do it except it interests Besmara. And Linda also found it interesting, so interested the GM. So sort of the GM was almost playing the role of the goddess of being interested in giving us these. And then the shaman was like, why do we keep finding all of these ships constantly? Like, no pirate finds ships at this rate. Every time we go somewhere, there's another ship. And the swashbuckler is like, Besmara thinks it'll be more interesting if we find them constantly. And that was, that's the GM's doing. So sometimes you actually can have the GM playing the role of the god, but I don't want to digress too much.
You see what Alf wrote? Actually, he wrote, if GMs are gods of gods, but then what are authors? Gods of GMs. But Mark, you wrote Pathfinder Second Edition, half wrote it, so you are the god of gods of gods. You're the god of you're the god of everything. Since if you write the game system, then every book under it has to be under that, and then every adventure has to be under that, and then every GM has to be
alpha and the omega.
You are the alpha and the omega. Literally, you are.
What is it? Ao from Forgotten Realms, the overgod Ao.
Yeah. You are the overgod, but
oh dear.
Well, it depends. If you write the game system, then yeah, you are. You're above the GMs. Because think about it, the GMs always ask us for rules adjudication. So yes,
but
we are above
secret,
you.
though, which is that GMs have the option to just do whatever they want. So
yeah, but they still like to know.
It's sort of a separation of powers that is, there's like. The designers make the game, but it's up to the GMs to interpret it. So
true.
And they sometimes will go back to the designers asking for advice on things, but that doesn't mean that it's kind of like the designers are like the drafters and maybe the Supreme Court or like a judicial branch, and the GMs are like the legislative branch who is going out and actually like making the rulings that at their own table.
So people are asking about some of this. So Yeah, because there's min-maxing, winning pathfinder. So some of these terms, by the way, where they came from.
Oh yeah, I forgot about min-maxing in
Yeah,
terms of the
we'll
other
get that in a
terms.
second. But the term, so the win now button is actually I don't know if it's used other. We use that a lot in video game production because that's where it's literally a win now button. Like you press that button, you win. So that's
Or
where
an
that
I win button I've heard.
yeah
also.
win button. But I like to call it the win now button or so yeah the win button, which is basically how do you like quote win a video game. So that's one thing. The winning pathfinder actually that's from Community, the episode where Pierce played Dungeons and Dragons and I won. Like and he won at Dungeons and Dragons, and I always think of that because it's so well delivered, the line and just that whole episode of how he played this game and beat everyone, and that's an example of a power gamer, but of just destroying the game for everyone. You want to see power gaming, an example of like a bad player and all that. Watch that Community episode. That's like
that
the
is
definition.
not only power gaming, but also being a toxic player who is literally trying to psychologically damage one of the other players in particular.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing. That's a fantastic episode on lots of levels.
I want to talk about min-maxing though, because I couldn't think of the word for it until they said it there. I knew there was a fourth one.
Yeah, min-max.
Slasher Hawk says that the bad kind of optimizing is just any time you make an effective character, but the power gaming is what others call min-maxing, or Steven calls winning pathfinder is bad necessarily. See, I think that min-maxing, I have a different definition for min-maxing because of the way that the term is. I think that min-maxing is a very specific kind of optimization in which you are attempting to, it has to be involved in an opportunity cost situation like point buy, or where you're taking one thing and not another, where you lower your effectiveness or capability in certain areas that you're expecting not to have to deal with, or that won't be very important to you, in order to get more advantage in the things that you actually care about the most. And I think that that is what my definition of min-maxing, and that's why it has the min and the max in it, because you are minimizing certain things in order to maximize other things. I don't
think min-maxing is actually, I think, here's the joke. You're
saying that maxing is the most power gaming, where you just
maxing, right? That's power gaming. Min-maxing, you should min-max in Pathfinder. If you want to make a good character, and I'm not saying you should min-max, like make everything as perfect as possible, because you'll always be upset, but you should min-max your character. You should build your character so that it's using the right abilities and stats according to either how you want to play your character. Like if you want to have 1,000,000 skills, then make sure you have the, intelligence and the class that you can, and feats that you can put a lot of time and effort and have every single skill. And in our Extinction Curse game, one of the characters was very excited because I think at level 12 he's like, I'm trained in every single skill now, and he was very happy about it. And some of the other characters are trained in like 2 like they have like no skills, and that's not min-maxing. That's min-maxing for them, and that's fine. But maxing, that's the problem, where you have no flaws, you have nothing bad, there's nothing broken about your character. If you don't have flaws, then you will, that's the win now button. And I also use it a good example of Magic the Gathering, because I've mentioned this in the past, I saw one of the greatest talks I ever saw at the Game Developers Conference by Richard Garfield, where he went through and why Fallen Empires, which is considered the worst expansion ever for Magic the Gathering, was such a colossal failure. There's a lot of reasons, but the main one is that all the cards were average or good. There was no super powerful cards, and there were no super weak cards, and everyone hated it. Everyone hated that set. And they purposely now build Magic where they will put in the Leviathans and these cards. I saw a new card recently that if you got 20 counters on the card, or I think 10 counters on the card, it became a 20/20 invulnerable creature with flying. I'm like, well, that's a win now button, and if you manage to get that out, congratulations, you'll probably win the game, but it's very, very hard to get out. So you can put
So
those
you're
tools.
talking about sort of the Timmy cards that like
Yes.
seem exciting,
Yes.
even if they're not actually that powerful.
Yes. No, or they are, but they're impossible to use. So they purposely put in
but
Timmy
they're not
cards.
actually that powerful if they're impossible to use.
Exactly.
I mean, actual power, not but they have a high apparent power, like Leviathan.
Correct. Is that you put in the Timmy cards, and you have to purposely put in weak cards to make the other cards feel more powerful. And that is something you have to do, and you'll see that a good example of that is World of Warcraft, because there's actually math on the objects of the rarity. Like, for example, I'm just using a very simplified system, is that maybe a common item they use 5 points to build the stats, but an uncommon item they use 7 or 8 points to build the stats. So it's literally better because they have more points. And then the rarer the item, the more points they have to build the stats. So they literally are more powerful because they use more points and the stats go up. So if you ever have like the common version versus an uncommon version of the exact same item, the uncommon version will always be theoretically more powerful because there's more stats.
To get you to chase the rare drops. It's part of the cycle of World of Warcraft. Yeah.
Right. But they did that on purpose because they're like, you want the items that are rarer to be more powerful than the more common ones. And they do that through math. And
because grinding and loot drops is a big part of their game. So of course they would do that. That would be terrible if like you did the super rare thing and you had to go into this instance and fight it, and it's like, all right, here, it's worse than the common.
Yeah, no, I know that the WoW knowledge is from 15 years ago. You're talking to someone who was in the Friends and Family Alpha. Don't remember, John Statz was the first 3D designer ever hired by Blizzard in history. So I am going by that. However, if you want to use a more recent example, Diablo and roguelikes do use that math still to this day for their items.
Diablo's not the original Diablo is a less recent example.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Yes. But the point is that you want to have the quote more powerful items to be more powerful as opposed to just theoretically. But anyhow, the point being is that the win-win button is that I use 50 points to build my character and not 25 or 15 because I don't want any of my stats to be low. I refuse. So therefore, I'm good at everything. I am the fighter who is fantastic at fighting, has an 18 intelligence. I have every single skill. I'm invincible. And I'm like, great. Okay, that'll be fun for you. It's like, and then they can do every aspect of the game. Something else that came in play, interestingly, is that they were in an area in one of my games, and they knew something was trapped. 13th level, couldn't disable it, had to get through it. They didn't have a thief. They didn't have a rogue. It's got to suck and bear it and turn and set off that damn trap. It didn't matter, and that's an example of like, doesn't matter how much you win now or how power gaming you are. Sometimes you just have to suck it up and take it. And oh my God, did they take it? Not only did they open that door, but then they got hit by 3 poison needles that really did a number on them and almost killed them outright. And then everyone scrambled to give them healing and antidotes so that they wouldn't die in like a turn. But that's something else. Thief that could be another topic. Thief is an interesting thing in Pathfinder and D&D because if you have one, you can like take care of things like traps and hazards. If you don't have one, just grin and bear it, man. There's not a lot you can do. It's pretty hard to get around those. You're just gonna set them off, and that's it. It doesn't matter how powerful you are, and that's the thing. It's like with everything else in those games, combat you can get away with very powerful and just brute force your way through. Skill check, same thing. Like you could brute force your way through skill checks, but traps and hazards. if you can't disable them, you can't. There's no way around it. So Mark is busy writing. Look at him. He's just putting in a storm there. Look at that. He's just flying.
An elemental storm.
You are. It is an elemental storm.
RPG Superstar Elemental Storm or whatever.
Yeah, someone asked, so someone's like, where's RPG Superstar? Here's the issue. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of work and a lot of time to do it. And I just got to finish. We got to finish Indigo Isles. We got to finish the first Kickstarter. It's very close. And once that one's done, because then I don't want to have that one and the new Kickstarter looming over, which by the way we're doing tons of work on, so that one's
we're
actually
doing really well on that.
That one's doing fine. That one's doing
that
fine.
one, like about half of the Year of Monsters has like its first.
That one's fine. That one I'm not concerned about. We have art.
Like a fifth of the monsters from RPG Superstar already done.
Yeah,
so
that
we're
one's
going really
flying.
well on
That one's flying, but
that one would be going even faster if Jewel Indigo Isles wasn't.
That's
still
the problem. Indigo Isles, like, it has to get done. But you know what? You don't even know this, Mark. I think the Indigo Isles character guide is pretty much done for Pathfinder. I added I finished the pirate and I finished Old Woody, and I think that's it. I think we're kind of done with that. I'm just gonna finish that one up so I can knock that one off and just have that done. And then we have the 5e version in review right now for the first adventure.
The first adventure of that is close.
Yeah, it's very close. It's in review.
Probably going to be the one that in some ways is the hardest, because you're first figuring out how to format.
That's the first one's the hardest.
It.
Yeah.
Once you solve some of those questions, the other ones might be a little easier.
Yeah.
Even though, yes, the third one's way longer.
The third one is just time. I'm not so concerned. Yeah. But yeah, I'm very close to getting that done. I just want to, once Jewel Indigo Isles is out, and then we're pretty much done with that Kickstarter, and then it's really just waiting for the books to come in.
Yep.
And then I want to do the RPG Superstar. I want to do it, but it's like, it takes a lot of time, and it's like a limited amount of time. And right now, Indigo Isles, for better or for worse, I must have put in like 15,000 hours in that thing. It's way too much time. Like, there's so much time in that put into that project. I was like, okay, it's thousands and thousands. Let me think about that. Thousands of hours.
That's 1,875 work days.
It's thousands of hours. It's thousands of hours have been put into that. It's too much.
Maybe not 15,000, but yes, definitely thousands of hours.
I don't know if it's up to that, but it's
from Linda's writing alone. Like her third adventure is so long because you came up with so many new ideas after she put in the first ones, and are like, go back and add this. And even that alone was a lot of hours. And when you add it to your layout and also your pass and doing the outline and Patrick's and Ron's time and my time, and there's thousands of hours going into this for certain.
Oh, well, then if you add in all the art, like the art alone.
Oh yeah, the artists.
Well, the art alone. So if you average, so probably
there's
each
so much
piece.
Art. How long does it take an artist to draw one of these
One of those
things?
is only, if you want to do an average is probably a good 8 hours.
And 8 hours,
8 to 10.
How many pieces are in?
Hundreds.
It's like, so that's already thousands of hours just from the artists alone. So we might get closer to 10,000 than we thought when we started out.
Pretty close to about 10,000 hours, I would say. And that's too much. That's too like it's the Pathfinder is more than halfway done. I'm trying to finish this book, because then once I get one book done, I'll mentally feel better. Like, done. Like, that book's done, and then I can do the 5e version.
Yes.
And that actually will go pretty quick. Actually, that one I think I could finish very fast.
David and Ross did a good job converting it, and it shouldn't be too bad. Now that you've worked out the kinks of how to do the conversion process and how to lay it out, I think.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is that 5e. I told Mark, if I ever find the person who came up with the layout and design templates for 5e, I will shoot them, because I am trained in this. I'm trained in interactive and layout design. I'm trained in, I've been doing this. I taught it professionally for many years in many colleges, and going from Pathfinder, which is so well done, to 5e, which it's not. It's like I'm having to invent new layouts, and it's infuriating. because I'm trying to use standardizations, and their standardization is interesting because it was all done from business point of views. I could probably do a whole talk on that. I've gone through a lot of the books and I can see why they did it, and they did it for money and not for ease of use, and it is very annoying. So anyhow, we
Legal
are trying
disclaimer: all of Steven's offers to shoot or murder someone who created layout are hyperbole and are not an actual
I'm not going to do it.
threat.
I didn't say what I'd shoot him with. I'm shoot him with kindness. Okay, not really. I'd be very angry. I'm like, I just look at these 5e books. I'm like, this is why everyone comes up with their own layout and design for these things, because there is no standardization. And even the ones that people come out with, it drives me crazy. Well, we're coming out with one, like traps, for example, traps in 5e, it's just a block of text. I'm like, really? You know how hard that is to understand? So it came up with a nice template of traps. It has everything outlined, so you can just read it. Why? I know why. I know why they did it. There's reasons. It's very easy to lay out. If you have walls of text, it's easy to lay out, which is only ironic because their monster stat blocks are the hardest things to lay out ever, which is why I changed them, which is another topic we can go into. Anyhow, the 5e version's almost done. There you go.
Yay!
So many questions, much more than layouts. Yeah. Well, the layouts are fascinating because the layouts are how you communicate information to the people. So it's important to have consistent and informational layouts. And that's something I used to teach, is that, like, how do you use layout and design to convey information? And there's a science to this, and there's like certain fonts to use, certain colors to use, even spacing, things like that. And it's actually very well known, especially now. And there's like different rules you need to follow, the rules of 3, things like that. And when I see some people do it, especially in a space where text and context of information is very important, and then they don't do it and they're successful, I kind of wonder why. because the layouts, they use like these fonts that are 6-point type in 5th edition. Why? I see complaints all the time. The fonts are way too small. I mean, you can't use 6-point type. It's like they use these itty bitty fonts all the time, and they use very strange layout choices, and it drives me nuts. All right, I'll stop ranting. I've just been doing layout. Right. I've been doing 5e layout for like 2 weeks straight, so I'm like kind of...
I've been building monsters and helping Steven with anything that happened during the 5e layout during that time. And let me tell you, there's some interesting monsters in last year's RPG Superstar, that some of which I'm excited to use. Mm-hmm. I'm probably going to run Strength of Thousands next because, as I will claim, it is definitely better than Extinction Curse. And I'm thinking about which places I can use some of these RPG Superstar monsters, because I feel like some of them would fit in pretty well into that adventure path.
Yeah, it's there's some now. I'm starting to go through them in more detail. There's definitely some fun ones in there, because I didn't go into them nearly as much. I don't get into them in the detail till the very end. That's when I actually look at them, and I've been looking at them just because we're ordering the art, and actually there was one that came up recently. It's a dragon, but it's a cat. It looks like a cat, but it's actually a dragon. I think it's like a CR2 dragon, and so the artwork is literally, it's a cat, but it's a dragon. It basically has scales, but the scales look like a cat. So I literally told the artist, make a cat and make it a dragon, and it's perfect. It looks like a cat dragon. I was like, I love that. It's so cute. It's like the perfect combo. Kind of surprised no one thought of that one earlier either. I was like, it actually works out really great, because cats are kind of devious and kind of sneaky looking. So all I did is find a picture as a reference. I'm like, looked up like sneaky or stalking cat, and I found this cat stalking. And I'm like, okay, add horns, give it wings. You got a dragon cat, and there we go. And I was like, that's cool. It looks great too. And then I was like, I like that one. And then there's one that's an angry sphere, which is like,
I remember that.
That's like from Phantasm. Phantasm has the spheres. It's literally a screaming sphere, and I was like, I kind of like that.
Ironically, the cat dragon that you got on purpose one time Linda's team, like early in her time at Paizo, got by accident almost that exact same art when they were trying to order a regular dragon.
Well, there you
Because
go.
they asked for a tiny cat-sized dragon, and it was basically a cat dragon like
Well, there you
that.
go.
The artist gave them. They're like, wait, no.
You got to be careful.
One of their two famous stories, the other of which was, you know, the Harrow cards that are
Yes.
like the tarot deck in Golarion, and there's like a physical set of them that
I
exists.
have
that
it, actually.
Yeah, right. They have that back that is like very stylized. It has like a copyright symbol and says Harrow at the bottom. So they ordered a in-world harrower who had a bunch of Harrow cards that they were like dealing out, and the artist drew them with the back of the physical real-world Harrow card that said like Harrow, like trademark, and had like the very like cartoony harrower on the back of the card.
Well, you see, remember,
really
I was going through that with you recently, like how to edit and put in art orders. And there, you got to be very specific.
No, it's different depending on which company you're in with art orders for sure. Because in Paizo, they tend to want you to not put in too much information with the idea that many of the artists' English isn't even necessarily their first language. They might get confused if you put in too much. So Paizo says heavy on the references and trying to give them as much flexibility as possible, except for things you absolutely need. Like if it's like, no, it has to be a great X that it's holding, you do say that, but like otherwise you give them leeway, whereas your style is to give them more instruction, and you definitely get back things that are more specifically in tune with like poses and postures and some of those specific things than I would when I was ordering for Paizo, when you're giving the very specific instruction for it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, the problem with references is if you give references, I've seen them copy them exactly.
Yeah,
and that's another problem. It's like,
did I tell you the story of when I kept trying to order the art of when Amiri, the iconic barbarian, got her very iconic giant sword from killing a frost giant?
I don't remember, but I do hear that.
I had three times that I was like, okay, well, we're gonna illustrate the oniric horror spell in Occult Adventures, which is about a dream of one of their greatest challenges. I thought, well, she was level 1 and she had to fight a frost giant. It's got to be him. So I was like, okay, it's the iconic barbarian and she's fighting a frost giant. And I was like, here's the reference. I was like, there's one thing. It cannot be holding an axe like it is in the reference. It needs to hold a giant sword that looks exactly the same as the sword that the barbarian is using, because she gets the sword from him. And it was holding an axe. It was exactly the same. So I tried it again in a different book. And then again, it was holding an axe. And then I tried it a third time, and I believe that it was still holding an axe. That was like in the core rulebook for maybe second edition. There was like a half pager, and it's still holding an axe in that one too.
Yeah, that's the
so you're absolutely right that that's possible.
Well, that's the other secret, is that I have all my artists give me multiple. They have to have their sketch approved. And that's a big one, because
I mean, there's sketch approval at Paizo too, but you still don't always.
Well, true, but you'd be amazed.
There's some amount of negotiation and keeping up a good relationship with the artists that happen.
Don't like to do that, and then I even want color approval, and that a lot of artists don't like color approval. They just want to go from sketch to finished. But I have a lot of steps, but then you get what you. But the problem is when you're dealing with fantasy is that what they're thinking and what you're thinking is very different. You have no idea. Like if you look at ours right now, we have the gunpowder bear in our overlay here, which is literally a bear with sharp teeth, claws, and satchels filled with gunpowder. They got it, it was like I didn't have to tell that much, because you kind of know what that is. That's a reference. But then if you look here at some of these other ones, you have I forgot the one up in it's the crawler, I think, the one that's like
a mirage crawler.
Yeah, it's like the enormous rock that has legs and a tongue, and it's eating a horse. It's like,
that's the mirage crawler.
Yeah, that's a little harder to, that went through a couple of rounds. Because there's no real reference for that.
And what about the Dada? That's really hard to draw, because it's like supposed to be Dada art, and it's like super.
That one,
like,
well,
abstract.
I didn't make it. Yeah, that one, they got that on the first try, by the way.
Oh, wow, that was first try. That's very impressive.
Did you see how long my description was?
Yeah, it was like
It was very long.
Was legitimately
and
like
very detailed.
like 300 words or something like that. It was.
Yeah. It was
if
like,
you did that for all of the
no,
monsters,
I don't do that for all.
but if you did, you would have wound up writing something that was like almost as long as like an adventure for an adventure.
I didn't
path.
make it though look like a Dada with the sharp angles because I think that looks weird, and I think there's a time and place for that. Like if you had a monster made out of stained glass, I think that's fine. And there actually is an origami.
Oh yeah,
the origami.
Yeah, the origami.
What's
it's like
called?
An origami crane or something.
Yeah,
like
origami
that
bird, origami crane.
Yeah,
that's literally a bird made that looks like origami, and I made it though more complex origami, so that looks like paper. But I felt this one is weird enough that I was like, look, he's got enough to deal with 8 arms and 7 legs
and quills and
I was like, and quills and I was like, just get it done. Like it's like I don't need it to look like a Dadaist painting. That would be at the level of insanity. So I was just happy it came
make it
close.
look like Marcel Duchamp's nude descending in a staircase.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. It's like
right?
you have to pick your battles, and my battle was, it looks cool, and that's good enough, and I don't have to make it. If I really wanted. And that's the thing. It's like some things are easier than others. Even like that bunny rabbit in the ball. I forgot what that one's called. I like that one.
Yeah, the like the psychogenic lagomorph or whatever it was.
Yeah, that one's interesting because that one it uses the actual image
Steven,
he gave
I sent
us.
you nude descending a staircase.
Oh, okay.
Imagine if it actually looked like that. That's literally from a Dada artist.
Oh, I know which one it is. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Oh, it would be impossible. It would be impossible to draw. Yeah, exactly. It's like I know that. Yeah, it's like you know what? That's the thing. But but that's actually that comes. We've talked about this. Is like like if you make this comes up. It's like if you make male and female dwarfs, supposedly in the lore that it's impossible to tell the difference between male and female dwarves.
I mean, not in Pathfinder, but
not in Pathfinder, but in Tolkien and other fantasies. But if you do that, there's issues with that. So, do you actually make everyone look like male dwarves, including the females, or do you not? And then you literally, and that's something Patrick and I would talk about. Like we would talk about how do you make them look, should they look like traditional male female genders for humans and humanoids, and that's something that comes into, and I use actually the World of Warcraft reference because that's something that happened in World of Warcraft when they were deciding, because they had to figure out a lot of these classes came from the original Warcraft and they only had one model, which was usually the male model. So then they had to figure out what the female model for each of these looked like. And that was a big discussion. It's like, okay, how do you make a female undead? Or when they made the Taurens, like how do you make a female Tauren? And, they had to go through this. It was interesting to go through that whole discussion. So I've done the same thing with ours because it's like the Gamayan are actually not supposed to have breasts and have female form. It even says in the description that you can't tell them apart. But we added parts of it is because we also didn't want them all to look exactly the same. But the Chichori, they all actually do kind of look the same, more or less.
That's because they don't even do gender.
Right. They don't have genders.
They have a Chora instead, right. And those 7 don't look. The 7 Chori don't look different from each other.
Right.
So.
And so that we can get away with because they don't have gender, so that's something else. And even in the animal world, like gender, there is difference in gender for animals. So anyhow, I could keep talking about that. The Hardican. Yeah, the Hardicans are the same thing. They're also supposed to be difficult to tell apart. But
yeah,
but at the same time, I did that sometimes and I didn't do it other times. So that's something, that's just part of fantasy, is that it's like talking about it in theory is one thing, but then actually when you have to draw pictures of these things, you'd be amazed how quickly you have to, I wouldn't say change your tune, but you have to realize that if everything looks the same, it ends up being boring. And it also ends up being nebulous what you're looking at. Kind of like this example you just sent me of nude walking down the staircase. it looks like nothing. And and if you
Yeah.
have every ancestry look the same, then it's sort of like every dwarf has a beard, then they all look like the same and they sort of lose their speciality. So you want to make them have their own individuality. So anyhow, this is a whole thing. It's like the newer Pikachus having the tail. That's right. The original Pikachu does not have the black on their tail. That's something people assume, but if you look, they don't. But I think the newer ones do. They have the lightning bolt tail, and they have the black on the tail as opposed to the originals, which don't. So there you go.
Wait, the newer Pikachus have black on the tail? I guess I didn't notice that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's something everyone thinks. Everyone thinks they have black, but they actually don't. It's like
but the new ones do apparently.
Yes.
You said, or
yeah, I think the new ones do. That's a Mandela effect.
I didn't think that it ever had black on its tail.
A lot of people do.
I've just never seen the new one.
Yeah, a lot of people do. It actually looks better. You know why? It actually looks better with the black on the tail. That's also part of it, is that sometimes a fan or someone will do a design and it'll just be better. Like, for example, in Halloween, Michael Myers, you know what his name was in Halloween? And it's even in the credits, is The Body. That's his name, The Body. No one calls him The Body. Pinhead was originally, I forgot, Pinhead's original name wasn't Pinhead in Hellraiser, but everyone just decided to call it these things, and that's just what it became. And same thing with the Pikachu. I think someone came up with this design, and everyone just liked it better, so it just was being used in like fan art, and to the point that they're like, fine, we'll just give you what everyone seems to want. So it just happens. Anyhow. So power gaming, I think we answered it. Maybe, I can't tell.
I think
it's all over the place.
The answer was that we gave is that it is bad if your social contract in your group is set one way for most players and one person is violating it by power gaming, by playing a character that's way more powerful than everybody else had in their social contract.
Yes, that's power gaming. Power gaming is that
we were saying that
or
was
you're being
bad.
Selfish.
The question was, is power gaming bad or not? And the answer is, when you selfishly doing it in a way that breaks the expectations of everyone else, then it is. And other times it won't necessarily be bad. Also, I'm really not finding this Pikachu with the black tail now. I've looked up Scarlet Pikachu and everything. I can't
look
find
up Mandela effect Pikachu.
Okay.
You'll find it that way. But everything we're talking about, if you go to battlezoo.com, and there's a new survey up. Do you want to put the survey link up for everyone to choose what ancestries they want?
Hold on.
Let
me do that really quick.
Yeah, so what we did is that there's 12 ancestries coming out in the Year of Monsters, which is coming up sooner than you think, because it's going to start in January. And I wanted to get an idea of what people liked. And so we put up a survey where you can rank them. And we're going to use that information. And I might even have a few more surveys after that to even do more ranking. I kind of like the brackets. I might do a bracket. I wanted to do a bracket of like,
cool.
of like all the of all the ancestries.
Hold on, I've got the link.
So we got one winner.
Send this out. So take this survey from here.
Yes.
In order to show people what the Roll for Combat Live fans think of the monsters. Yeah. And I'm being a little smarter about this now, so I'm actually I'm using different collector links from the different places. So this is not the same link that was in the newsletter.
And we'll do one on Reddit, and we'll send a few
only
out.
Take it once from the various links, but this will show if our live viewers like different monsters than the newsletter viewers, and I'll put it on Reddit, and maybe Reddit has different monsters it likes than the live viewers and the newsletter viewers as well. So it'll be interesting. And I'm also going to put it on the Kickstarter update, so we can see who likes what monsters, and if there's any interesting trends, like, yes, this monster was very popular, but only from Kickstarter.
By the way, Joho says that your answer is a cop-out answer, that breaking the social contract bad. You see, though, but power gaming is only something that can be defined within your own group. So I agree with Mark, because like, if everyone has a 50-point build, I might look at that as power gaming, But if you're all having fun and everyone has the same type of overpowered characters, who cares? You know, then you're having fun. That's not power gaming or overpowered. That's what you're playing. In my opinion, is that if everyone agreed to make 15-point characters and someone made a 40-point character and is trying to win every single encounter and complains like a baby when things don't go their way, then yeah, that's a bad thing. They're munchkin gaming or power gaming or min-maxing or max-maxing, you know, that's bad. But again, it's like it's within your own group. You know, a good example, I'll use World of Warcraft, is like when you do raiding, and if you're going to be doing, you know, like epic level raiding versus the public raiding is so easy. You can literally sit there, fall asleep at the keyboard, and still beat the monsters. If you're doing the, you know, top level, epic level raiding, unless all of you are in perfect sync, if a single person makes a mistake, the entire party wipes. So everyone is expected to have the utmost powerful gear at those high level raids. When I used to do epic level raiding at the highest levels, if you didn't spend hundreds of gold and flask up and have the absolute best gear with the perfect rotation, then you were kicked out of the raid. And that was what is expected at that level. So it's the same thing, I think, in role-playing, is that everyone has to play at the same level. And if you're not, and it could go the other way, if you're power gaming and overpowered versus the rest of the players, or underpowered, which we didn't really mention.
If
but
you're just intentionally weakening,
yeah.
I don't mean like, oh, you took a 16 instead of an 18. I mean just like you literally tried to make your character worthless so that, or like as bad as possible, because for some reason you either thought that made you better at role playing, or you wanted to make things more difficult, and your group did not want that. That can be just as bad.
Yeah, mythic level.
I will now
rating,
definitively answer the most important question of the show, which is, I looked that up on the Mandela effect, and there is no black-tailed Pikachu, as I thought.
I'll find
there
it.
There never was, and it's never been in there. Just a lot of people think that there is a black-tailed Pikachu that existed at some point. And according to the site I found, it is a common Mandela effect, but there isn't one. And there isn't one, period, except cosplay Pikachu in Generation 6, who is in a cosplay, includes like a little bit of black on its tail, and it's a variant Pikachu, and is not, they never made Pikachu have a black tail. Yeah, here we go.
Pikachu's black tail, did it exist, or Mandela effect?
And the answer is it didn't.
Right, I know, but the point is,
I thought that it didn't. Everyone here was confusing me by saying that it did exist. I was like, I don't think it ever had that.
I'm looking at it now. I'm looking at all, like, there's a picture of every single Pikachu, and you're right.
They don't have it, right?
Everyone thinks they do.
But I didn't. That's why I got so confused.
Well, you're a genius, all right. So
wait, it doesn't make you a genius to think that Pikachu doesn't have a black tail, a tip on its tail. It's just, I don't know. I'm the person who doesn't get hit by weird I
also think it looks better with the black on the tail, by the way.
Like, when I was in a cognitive science class at MIT, I kept screwing up our labs where we would all take the lab, and then one group would present the data, and it would be like, okay, everybody else like couldn't figure out that this word was secretly not in the data set, and it was a similar type of word, but one person always did correctly say that wasn't in the set, and it's probably marked, so we've excluded it from the data.
Oh yeah, Bernstein Bears. So Bernstein Bears, by the way.
Yeah,
actually, two things I want to talk about. Joho, you can kick people out of your mythic raids. Trust me. You want to talk about mythic raiding? I won't get into it now. Me, Bob Marquis, John Statz, who literally invented half the raids in World of Warcraft. He literally authored all the original vanilla WoW. So, and Chris Beamer, who still plays to this day. I could talk about mythic raiding for days.
Wouldn't it be funny if someone kicked John out of a mythic raid and he was like, "Dude, what are you doing? I created these raids."
Oh yeah. He would be. Well, he was not the best player. He was good. Don't get me wrong, but he wasn't mythic level.
He could use that inventor reaction from PF2. No, I created you.
Okay, you want to hear a funny story? I'll tell you a funny story. I was in the Blizzard offices and we were playing. Was it which one was it StarCraft? No, it was Warhammer, not Warhammer, Warcraft 3. Was it 3? 2 or 3? I forget which one. It's been a while ago. And we're like, hey, let's play before we go out to dinner. We'll go up against the AI. And I'm with me and 3 of the creators of Warcraft. And so it's 4 of us against 4 AI. And we got our asses handed to us. So we're like, okay, let's go 4 against 3. So we went 4 of us against 3 AI. And we got our asses handed to us again. We're like, okay, let's go 4 against 2. So we went 4 against 2. And I was like, guys, you freaking wrote this game.
Did you at least win 4 against 2?
Yes, we won 4 against 2, barely.
Okay.
And we're like, and then we went out to dinner. And I was like, guys, you wrote this game. What the heck is going on? They're like, it's too damn good, man. It's too damn. And they literally said, it's like, that's why we don't test it. They would bring in pros. They bring in the pros to test it because they're not good enough. You know, they're not even close.
There's no reason that someone who is the best at designing it has to also be the best at
terrible.
playing it.
No, they weren't good at all, even though they know everything. They just weren't good enough. And they would get in pros and fly them in. And this is like literally 20 years ago. They would literally fly in everyone and have them play it. And they would take notes and do all this, information so they get it. But as in Bernstein and Bernstein Bears, here's the secret. It is spelled both ways in their books. So
what?
Yes.
I don't think I've ever seen it with not
I will
having
give
the
you
A.
okay, go to Video Game Nerd. Video Game Nerd has a episode where he goes through in detail and it shows the books and they are spelled differently. So that's why the people are like, oh, it was never spelled. Actually, it was. I think it was actually spelled 3 different ways. And he goes through in detail showing all the books and how a few of them were spelled incorrectly. And
well, that just means there was a typo in a few of them.
No, on the cover.
Oh.
Well, and there's more than one. So there's no official spelling.
If the advanced class guide could be an adventure path, then I understand that covers sometimes can have errors too.
Yeah, but it's not even an error. It happened like if say 50 of the books, like 40 of them were Bernstein Bears, and then 10 of them were Bernstein Bears. So it wasn't like one.
Well,
it was a couple.
Enough.
And
I don't remember any of the Steen Bears.
Anyhow, go to it's a pretty popular video. If you go to
I'll do that after
Video
this.
Game Nerd, and I forgot what it's called, but he's talking about like memories and like Mandela effect, and that's one of the things he talks about. And then he brings them up and shows them in
also
like, detail.
If Juho thinks my answer that doing something in a way that breaks the way that other people are playing and breaks the social contract is bad is a cop-out, then they will Juho, you will probably not like my answers to most of these provocative questions, because that is almost always my answer to these questions, is that it depends on what your group wants to do, and if you are doing the thing that the rest of your group doesn't want to do, then it's bad. Doesn't mean you're a bad person.
Oh, by the way, yeah,
right? It's just a bad situation.
I have been in Mythic Raids, and I have played in the last 8 years. I haven't played probably... We played a lot, and then I stopped at Cataclysm. Cataclysm sucked, and then we picked it up again a few years ago. I forgot when I stopped playing about maybe right before COVID. I stopped playing, so we were doing Mythic raiding quite a bit. But yeah, no, I it really came down to I actually loved raiding, but we did everything. We did like Firefighter, we did 3 Drakes, way back when it was insanely hard. The other thing is, you're right, they didn't have Mythic raiding. They just had raiding, and they just made it impossible, and then every couple of weeks they would lower the difficulty until eventually more people can do it. That was the other thing they would do. And then they came up with Mythic raiding and all the other raiding. But yeah, I've done Mythic. Anyhow.
All right, that's a good place to stop, since when we're doing it on Wednesday, I need to be off by
I gotta go too. I got stuff to
Linda's meeting. So take care, everybody. I am back to those RPG Superstar monsters. I am very excited to be looking at whatever the heck this next monster is. I think it was some kind of interesting thing.
I'm trying to figure out what I don't know. I'm trying to figure out if I should put a sidebar.
Oh, it's a Quilipoth this time. That's cool. I haven't done any Quilipoths yet.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out to put a sidebar in the character guide or not. because it's like there's not a lot of content. It's not that big. So I was looking at some of these examples, but like this Lost Omen, like look how tiny the sidebar is there. It's like the Grand Bazaar is it has the smallest sidebar ever.
It's that's mostly just a navigation sidebar.
Yeah, well, that's what it is. It's navigation sidebar. So I was like, it's like I put it in our other products, or at least in the Dragons, I put it in, and I'm planning on putting it in the final version.
I feel
of
like there's
Isles.
enough different little pieces that you might want to have a nav bar, just because otherwise, if someone wants like just the pirate feats and that's like 2 pages out of 100, it may be hard to find it. Maybe. I guess. I mean, they could just go to the table of contents.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just true too, because then you at least know where it is in the layout. I'm fooling around with it. I started that right before the stream, but it's like this big, and I was like, it's so small. I was like, it looks weird when it's like a good. You want to like at least 2/3. Sorry, you want at least a third, half the page. But when it's like 2 inches high, it's like it looks weird. So I'm trying to figure out what to do. Anyhow.
All right. Well, take care, everyone.